Okay, hello. We are going to get into some of the history of radio here, and I should make the point as we get started here that radio is the first and the oldest form of electronic mass media, leading to television and the internet. And of course, radio is still very much with us, but television and the internet flow from radio. And we're going to spend some time talking about the beginnings of radio and the things that it has led to. Before radio, something that was huge advancement was the telegraph. And it was invented by Samuel Morse, 1844. This was the first time that we had the ability to send electronic signals over wires, more or less send a message electronically instantaneously from one point to another. Before that, it simply did not exist. And the world is a very different place because of this. So we're going to look at a short video on the invention of the telegraph by a gentleman named Samuel Morse.
Text messaging, 1843 style. All right, Len, today we've got a big one. Tell me what we have right here.
It's the first telegram.
Ever.
The first official telegram sent on May 24th, 1844.
Earth-shaking, of course, because it allowed people to communicate who were hundreds of miles apart from each other. It's hard to overstate how important this was.
Well, you know, with hindsight, we can realize that this started the telecommunications revolution. To get a message from A to B, you had to physically take it there. You had to walk it, run it, get on a horse, a boat.
Or be in visual sightline, I guess.
Well, yeah. But on this day, May 24, Samuel F.B. Morse has a battery and a little key. He has strung wires 38 or so miles from Washington to Baltimore. And people knew that you could send electricity through a wire and have something happen. But the genius of Morse is that he knew what he wanted to have happen, and what he did was he was able to instantly communicate. He could send a message from here to there instantly.
By having the patterns and pulses of the signal.
A telegraph is two things. You have to be able to send the message through a wire, a single wire, send electricity from here to there, and just on off, basically. But then you have to, what is the message? You know?
Yeah.
Is the message beep? Well, in this case, it's dot dash, dot dash.
So he invented the Morse code that we're familiar with today.
Yeah, that's why it's called Morse code.
Yeah.
Our conservation office has encased it in this plastic thing so we can hold it without gloves.
Because this is the original that we're holding.
This is the original, what hath God wrought? That was the first message that was sent.
So the message itself was transmitted via these impressions in the paper.
Exactly.
And then afterwards, the actual letters, which are recognizable to our eye, were added in ink below the impression. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Going to pause that there. It goes on for another minute or so. But the telegraph, hard to overstate the importance of the telegraph and what it led to. Which one of those things certainly was radio. Also, the telephone then followed the invention of the telegraph. This was the ability to speak over wires and have your voice be transmitted again instantaneously from one point to another. Alexander Graham Bell, a name you probably have heard of, invented the telephone. So this came about 30 years after the telegraph. Now, so radio combined these elements, the telegraph and the telephone, with wireless transmission. We've been talking about sending telegraph messages or telephone messages over wires. And with radio, or what was originally called wireless, then we had the ability to send telegraph signals over the airwaves without wires. So the inventor of radio is considered to be Guglielmo Marconi. Again, originally called wireless. There's a picture of him at about the age, probably just a little bit later than when he invented wireless, and only about 20 years old at that time. Now, at first, wireless was mainly something that was useful in shipping, seagoing ships, communicating with each other and communicating to people back on land. And again, we're only talking in the beginning about telegraph signals. I'm going to give you an example of telegraph signals here in a moment. So wireless came to the attention of the general public, very much so with the rescue of the Titanic survivors in 1912. And I think you all know the story of the Titanic, probably have seen the movie from a number of years ago. And the Titanic was able to bring rescuers to at least rescue several hundred people because of wireless. And that distress call would have sounded very much like this. Again, we're talking about telegraph signals, not voice. This is, of course, not the original transmission. This is a recreation of that transmission. So here they're giving their position in the ocean, longitude and latitude. Where can they be found? And so these signals would be sent out and received on another ship, and then that ship, which happened to be called the Carpathia, came to rescue the several hundred survivors of the Titanic who were in lifeboats. There you see the message sinking. Cannot hear for the noise of the steam. So someone was sending out this message while the Titanic was going down. Very likely that person himself died within a few minutes or an hour or so. But heroically he stayed at his post and sent out that message. So this is an example of how wireless originally was used. Another young man you see there is named Reginald Fessenden. And Fessenden, even before the Titanic went down in 1912, Fessenden had taken wireless, which was derived from the telegraph, and he had taken telephone technology, and he had figured out a way to send a voice over the airwaves. So we had telephone, the ability to send a voice over wires or cables. Fessenden then figured out a way to take the wireless technology and the telephone technology, put those together, and to be able to send his voice and also recorded music and live music over the airwaves. So now you see we're moving in the direction of what we think of today as radio. So this came in 1906. There's a really nice little video there that goes with this. I don't want to take the time here to show it to you, but I think you'll enjoy it if you'll watch that video there. It's a recreation of Reginald Fessenden's first broadcast. Then we come to the first radio station as we think of it today, a radio station broadcasting to an audience of people on a regular schedule. KDKA in Pittsburgh, which is widely accepted as the first U.S. radio station. History is not nearly as clear-cut as we sometimes think that it is. There are disputes of this, but again, as it says there in the note, widely accepted as the first U.S. radio station. There's a fellow there named Dr. Frank Conrad, who was doing some experimental broadcasting in 1919, very similar to what Reginald Fessenden was doing. And again, he worked for a company called Westinghouse, which is still with us. And Westinghouse decided to put a radio station on the air, KDKA, in Pittsburgh. It went on the air November 2nd, 1920. So it's just been a very short time ago, really, that we had the 100th anniversary of radio broadcasting. And their first program was coverage of the presidential election. of that year, 1920. And let's see, there I have a couple of different things here. I think I'll go with this video. We'll see some of it. This is interesting for a number of reasons. One is that this is a video, and I'll wait until it gets started here.
$95 ago.
This video comes from, if you see this logo here, KDKA television. So KDKA radio, which is still on the air, and I'll show you an example of that here shortly. KDKA radio evolves into television, and the television station is still very much on the air in Pittsburgh. So we'll have a look at this video from, at least part of it, from KDKA television.
95 years ago, a man from Wilkinsburg sent out some of the first radio broadcasts from his garage. And those broadcasts led to the start of KDKA Radio, or KDKA Radio, the first commercially licensed radio station.
Today, a ceremony was held to rededicate the historical marker that once stood at Frank Conrad's home in Wilkinsburg. Dave Crawley has the story new at 6.
This is where the radio broadcasting industry as we know it today began.
February 2001, Rick Harris and Alice Sapienza Donnelly joined me on a final visit to the garage where Westinghouse engineer Frank Conrad broadcast on the frequency 8XK, which would later become
KDKA of the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company in East Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
1920. Commercial radio is born.
That was 13 years ago. Just a few weeks after our visit, the Wrecking Ball moved in to make room for a fast food restaurant, and Frank Conrad's house and garage made their exit. So, now what?
Broadcasters and radio buffs gather in Wilkinsburg, where Rick Harris continues the fight for a National Museum of Broadcasting.
So I'm going to pause that there. They wanted to, and they're still actually working on this, the last time I checked, to build a museum to Frank Conrad and to the original KDKA there in Pittsburgh, because they tore down the building. It was a garage that Frank Conrad broadcast from, and I believe there's now a historical marker there, but they're still trying to raise money to build a museum there. What you're looking at here, I think I might be able, I've paused this, I'm going to hope that I can click the go button, the play button. This is the website for KDKA Radio, which is still broadcasting in Pittsburgh. So let me see if I can click here, and we'll hear a few moments live broadcast from KDKA.
This morning by one of the companies that he said rigged the election. Well, they didn't, and it ruined the company, so they sued him. And I just said, he needs to go to court. He needs to go away. Can't do.
So this is a talk show that is on the air. So it's a news talk radio station in Pittsburgh, and they are, of course, on the air as a radio station in the Pittsburgh area, but they're also streaming online. And so we in Commerce, Texas, can listen to KDKA Radio, which first went on the air in 1920. And by internet technology and streaming, we can listen to that radio station anywhere really in the world.
Do that. It works both ways, though. This vitriol out there, this rage out there, this amazing woman pointed out this. First of all, when she sent it to me, I said to myself, this can't be true.
Okay, so again, that's KDKA broadcasting live today. So this is I just showed you that that website. So KDKA has gone from being the original AM radio station, FM came much later, and has evolved in 100 years into a television station, into an FM radio station, and also streams over the airwaves. So you see the entire evolution of electronic communications in this one radio station, the first radio station KDKA in Pittsburgh that went on the air in 1920. So very quickly, some other things we had, don't worry too much about this, but we had originally something called the 1912 Radio Act that basically addressed wireless and the transmission of telegraph signals over the air, not broadcasting. So the 1912 Radio Act really did not foresee broadcasting and radio as we know it. This is Herbert Hoover, who later became president. In the 1920s, he was the Secretary of Commerce. The 1912 Radio Act was organized under the Commerce Department, and so as the Secretary of Commerce, Herbert Hoover basically was in charge of radio broadcasting as it developed in the 1920s, and he organized a series of conferences in which all of the people that had an interest in radio came together and talked about how to best organize radio, how to regulate it. And so they came up with this thing called the 1927 Radio Act, which established the Federal Radio Commission. And what we're going to see in the next outline and video, if not the next one, then very soon, that the Federal Radio Commission becomes the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, which is still very much with us today and still oversees broadcasting and a lot of other forms of electronic communication. So Federal Radio Commission evolves into the Federal Communications Commission within a few years. But the 27 Radio Act defined the AM radio band. It organized a set of frequencies that would be used for radio broadcasting. Again, this was entirely on the AM band. FM radio didn't exist in the beginning. It came somewhat later, and we'll talk about that. And also this 1927 Radio Act established something very important that still exists today, that broadcasting, and now this includes television broadcasting, must serve the public interest, convenience, and necessity. So there must be a public service aspect involved with radio broadcasting and with television broadcasting, and the operators who receive a license to broadcast must provide public service. They must act in the public interest, convenience, and necessity. But the 1927 Radio Act also allowed advertising as the major source of revenue. It did not specifically say, yes, advertising is fine and dandy, but it did not prohibit advertising. And that had been fairly controversial, which again we'll talk about another time. But basically this 1927 Radio Act, still very much, most of it is still in effect today and shaped the form that radio broadcasting and later television broadcasting would take. Okay, we'll leave it at that for now. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.